I'm not pulling on the driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for another Drive to Work at Home edition. Okay, so today I'm here with Bryan Hawley, and we're going to talk about the design of Double Masters 2022. Hey, Bryan.
Hello. Hooray. Love Double Masters 2022.
Okay, so we're going to start the story at the very beginning. What was your earliest involvement with this set?
So my earliest involvement with the set was, after, deciding we were going to do it and getting signed up by Brady, was like, guess who's leading this one? It's you. I was like, yay, hooray. My earliest involvement was a couple of meetings with me, Eric Lauer, and Yanni Skolnick, who are both designers that have worked on a bunch of previous Masters sets, as have I. Kind of deciding like, all right, so we want to do another Masters set. We want to do another Double Masters set. That set was cool. But one of the things we've been kind of shifting towards, did shift towards with Double Masters and Double Masters 2, was having kind of a more thematic limited environment, something that sort of like Double Masters 1 was very artifacts matter. This one going in, we didn't know what we wanted it to be. We had a few different ideas, but I'm going to go ahead and be cagey about those because we may still do them someday in the far-flung future. Who knows? But we eventually landed on multicolor masters. We liked Double Masters 1. We were pretty sure that we were just going to call it Double Masters 2022, but we still wanted like kind of a central theme with the limited environment. So those meetings, there wasn't really a lead of that team. It was just the three of us talking, and kind of coming to a general plan that we all liked. And the kind of thing we were trying to figure out is master sets in a lot of ways are kind of trying to be a more saturated version of a limited environment. Like they're kind of trying to lean really far into whatever they're trying to do. The synergy level of the draft format is pretty high, as is kind of the power level and just splash value of a lot of the cards. So the thing that we settled on was, okay, this is a multicolor environment. We've done a bunch of multicolor environments. We've done multicolor environments with like 5 2-color pairs, 5 3-color trios. We've never done one that is all 10 3-color trios. So like, if we want to turn it up to 12, that's where we would want to go.
Yeah, well, let me jump in real quickly just to explain a little bit. Original Ravnica, for a very short period of time, was all 10 2-color pairs. And what we found in a Premier set is it's just too much. Like, it is just too... you have some space issues, but more than that, it's just too much for the average drafter to process. And
Yep.
So we have sort of drawn the line that in a Premier set, that usually about 5 is the most that we do when we do factions. We don't tend to go above 5. But you guys were going where Premier sets cannot go.
Yes, we did that. Like Synth Masters are kind of a much smaller print run. They're, like pretty heavily targeted at like players who have been around a while, really understand Magic, really understand the ecosystem, and have experienced a lot of those, the usual fare that we give in Premier sets. We're trying to give something that's like very, very different. The problem, of course, is like by now we have a pretty good like kind of understanding of what a 2-color set or a 3-color set with 5 factions kind of looks like and how to design one. We didn't really have much of an idea of how we were going to actually go about making these 10 3-color trios work. And the thing we quickly found was that it was a very, very difficult math puzzle. And one of the things that we also found very early is it was really, really important that people drafting the set did not need to care about that math puzzle. Like, to your point, having all 10 3-color trios available is like already a lot of complexity. needing to think through like how each of those trios interacted with the other trios in the set, and like how am I going to be able to pivot from like if I start drafting Jund cards and then I want to go into Esper, like how's that going to work? We really needed it to be a pretty intuitive experience. Like a lot of people only draft master sets 1, 2, 3 times at most. Like some people go really deep and draft them a bunch of times, but the experience does really need to be good the first time, because a lot of people will only draft it once. So we sketched out a few ideas, and I'll cut to the chase. Our first 2 ideas did not work. The thing we were trying to do, kind of using normal tools, like we were like, okay, so what if we just turn up the strength of the mana fixing in the format? Like, what if we just have all 10 tri-lands, like the ETB tap lands that produce 3 colors of mana, all 10 of them in common, and then we have other fixtures as well. That was the closest of our kind of early experiments. We also tried things like 2 ETB tapped lands that are 2 colors per pack, and we were kind of trying to find a middle ground where people were able to get enough mana fixing to play 3 colors, but didn't have so much that they just kind of felt compelled or like it was totally free to play 4 or 5 colors. Because if everyone at the table is doing that, it's not a very fun draft environment. Like everyone's deck looks the same. You can pretty much tell that everyone's deck looks the same. There's no real, like, you're not really trying to figure out what you're trying to do. You're just taking the best card you see every time. So we didn't, like, it's fine if a couple of people do that, but if that's the default thing people did, we wouldn't be happy. So the problem that we found with some of those kind of early initial tools was that when you take a tri-land, or take 3 tri-lands, let's say you're trying to draft blue, white, and green. Maybe you find a blue, white, green tri-land. You might find like a blue, white, black tri-land and a green, white, red tri-land. And now you're like, okay, well, now I have a little bit of an in to be able to play these other colors too. Like now I'm kind of more interested in splashing a red card or splashing a black card. And kind of having those like extra free mana sources in your deck was kind of pushing people into that sort of 4-color and 5-color soup, and was winding up making the draft a lot more complicated, because you couldn't like find a lane and kind of decide like, okay, I can mostly ignore cards that have red mana in them at this point in the draft. Like when you're opening your second and third pack, usually you want to be kind of like have a general idea what you're trying to accomplish. And when you were kind of accruing these incidental sources of mana that you weren't necessarily planning on using, you couldn't really do that because you were like, well, I can splash red and I can splash black.
Here, let me explain something to the audience that something about the math of 3-color. So when you have a 3-color faction, there's no such thing as no overlap, right? Every other 3-color faction is going to overlap with your 3-color faction, no matter what. When you do 2 colors, you can have 2 colors that don't overlap. But with 3 colors, there's always some overlap. And in fact, there is a bunch of double color, things that overlap by 2 color, especially when you're talking about having 10 things. So one of the big challenges, no matter what you do, like we like having some overlap, because some overlap allows flexibility. You don't want only one drafter to want any one card. You want people to fight over things. That makes for a more robust draft thing. But that when you talk about figuring out the math, the fact that, hey, I'm playing a 3-color deck and I overlap with, I overlap in 2 colors with 3 other decks, and I think you overlap with 1 color with an additional, like the only thing you don't overlap with at all, no, you overlap with everything. In a 3-color environment, you overlap with everything. Yeah.
There are 2 monocolor pairs that you cannot use, and depending on how willing you are to splash or whether it's hybrid, I mean, obviously there's the like 2-color pair that you're not using, but you can use 60%, like 6 of the 10 other of the 2-color pairs. So the challenge Yeah, very quickly gets to be what you were describing of like blending archetypes, like overlapping with adjacent archetypes, gets really, really intertwined really, really quickly. And when we were like using kind of normal tools for dual lands, what we were finding is like those overlaps became even more enmeshed, which is where we enter Cryptic Spires. In design, it was called Malleable Wilderness. That was just the name that I came up with while we were talking about it. It's actually something that like something like 3 or 4 years ago, we were exploring as just like something to add, like, do we want to just add this to every draft forever onwards? We very quickly found that we didn't really want to do that.
Wait. Okay, let's play this part. This is a cool story. Aaron made a mini team. I mean, Aaron wasn't on it, but he made a mini team. I think Eric Lauer was on it. Chris Mooney was on it. And he said to them, you were on, okay. And the goal was, can you improve draft? Is there anything we can do to improve draft? What can you do to improve draft? And, right, one of the ideas the team floated was, what if all drafts came with what ended up being Cryptic Spires? That I think everybody got 2 of them. Was that what you guys ended up?
That was kind of the, like, best solution, but it was also a solution that we were like, this is the best we came up with, but we don't like it, so we're not going to push on it. The benefit, like the problem it's kind of trying to solve is that like there is some benefit in kind of mana fixing in limited just being a little bit stronger. Mana bases that are all basic lands are a little bit less reliable, or they're significantly less reliable than constructed mana bases. And we were kind of looking to, like, is there a way that we can kind of elegantly and cleanly bridge that gap a little bit?
Just so they understand, you guys came to the conclusion that 3-color lands got you in trouble, but that 2-color lands did just a much better job of getting people to play 3 colors.
So for going back to Double Masters 2, so having a larger number of 2-color lands makes your mana base more consistent. Like a 3-color, like let's say you have 3 3-color lands or 6 2-color lands. The amount of variance, like the randomness game to game of the tri-land mana base is higher because if you don't draw one of those 3 cards, you're just drawing basics, whereas like you're a lot more likely to draw at least 1 or 2 of your 2-color lands. So like that helped. The real heart of the problem was the fact that when you have to pick like a jungle shrine, like a 3-color land that already has 3 colors defined, or like a what's it? I'm blanking on the like Stone Quarry. I think is the name of the red white. Anyway, if you need to like pick a land where it has those predefined colors, a lot of times you wind up taking those somewhat speculatively. Like you're not sure if you want to play red, but you take the white-red dual land to make it possible later. And what that was doing is it was kind of pushing you into playing more colors than just the cards you were trying to draft would naturally and organically make you want to do. So the reason we went back to Cryptic Spires, like we liked how it played in kind of draft at large. The problem is just the amount of complexity that adds to learning how to draft in general, which is already a somewhat daunting task for a new player. Was really high. Like having to know what this land is, how it works. It's a kind of weird object, and like parsing that was too much for main sets. But again, master sets can go where main sets can't sometimes, and this is one of them. So the thing we were trying to solve, and the things that Cryptic Spires kind of uniquely solved, is that when you're taking Cryptic Spires, you're getting the perfect land for your deck, which means that if you want to play more colors, you are necessarily giving something up because you could have made them into more fixing for your 3 main colors. Like if you have 5 Cryptic Spires and you want to splash a 4th color, you need to either play basics or kind of divert some of your fixing into being that 4th color, so it kind of destabilizes your 3-color base. Whereas when you've just been kind of like accruing as many 2-color lands of whatever colors you can find throughout the draft that are kind of tangential to what you're doing, the incentives kind of, sometimes that 4th color is closer to free, which is something that we were finding is a problem given the sheer density of gold cards and other options.
Yeah, so this is a cool concept. The idea that if I pick a land that, let's say I'm playing white, blue, black. If I take a dual land that has red in it, I now psychologically say, oh, well, maybe I want to think about red. I have a land that could produce red. But a Cryptic Spire, because you don't make that decision until kind of later, it doesn't, like, even though the potential exists, you don't think that way, right? That's an interesting thing, in that Cryptic Spire is like, well, I'm just going to make it what I need to make it to make my deck work, and you think about it later, but it doesn't open your mind up to thinking about other colors unless you're a pretty advanced drafter.
Mm-hmm. And even if you are a pretty advanced drafter, it's like, then you're kind of trading the cost-benefit analysis of like, okay, well, if I want to play that 4th color, I'm going to need more Cryptic Spires. Like, if I only wanted to play 3 colors, I might need like 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 if I'm particularly greedy with, cards with lots of mana pips on them. But if I really want to play that like off-color 3-color gold card, I'm probably going to need to pick up like an additional 2 or 3 Cryptic Spires, and more of my lands are coming into play tapped. So like, there is kind of, that like smooth transition of like, you're not really thinking about it until like, even when you do think about it, the incentives still line up to like what we were going for.
Okay, so you added in Cryptic Spire. That was a big part. What else did you need to do to here's one of the challenges I know that I didn't work on the set. So one of the challenges that would concern me is 10 is a lot. Like, just fitting in 10 is a lot. So how did you solve that? How did you fit it in? That's what I would worry about. Like, how do you even fit it in?
Very carefully, and with a lot of overlap. So, like, going back to that concept that you raised earlier with we need cards to be relevant to multiple archetypes so that multiple people at the table are interested in them, and you're kind of competing for resources. That needs to happen about twice as often in this 10 3-color trio world as it does in a normal monocolor 2-color world. So because it's basically we need a certain number of cards to support blue, white, black. We also need a certain number of cards to support red, white, black, and so on and so forth around this 3-color wheel. When you kind of just multiply that out and add it up, to your point, 10 3-color trios, just each of those trios needs the same number of cards supporting it as a 2-color pair, but there are just so many more combinations that each common has to go in more of the decks. For instance, when you kind of look through the common file for Double Masters 2, the limited archetypes, kind of synergy themes, are very core, central limited themes that have shown up over and over in Magic in a bunch of different ways. They are things with a bunch of different options, and a lot of the reason for that is we needed so many more cards that are this card is interesting to the blue, white, red Spells Matter deck. It also needs to go into the red, white, green heroic deck. It also needs to go into the green, white, black counters deck. So at that point, we're kind of looking at we need more slots to just have text that is relevant to 2 to 4 of these different archetypes instead of it's fine if this is mostly just interesting to the white-black player and the white-red player.
And here's another thing for the audience to remember is normally that's hard, but you had an extra problem thrown at you to make things even more complicated, which is this is a reprint set. You can make no new cards. A lot of times when we're stuck, we have to overlap. Okay, well, we'll make the card that overlaps, right? We'll make the thing, but you don't have that luxury. And so talk a little bit about having to find the card that existed already.
Yep. Yeah, and like the process of creating the archetype grid for Double Masters 2 was similarly very complex. Like the again, yeah, like to your point, most of the commons need to be like, this has an ETB for blink and it puts counters on things for the counters deck. This is like aggressively slanted 2-drop that also has a prowess trigger. Things like we need those overlaps so much that like the process of building out that grid is a lot of like, we build a grid where like, okay, we know what we want each 3-color trio to do. We know how each of those 2-color trios, and kind of, I mean, remember that like the blue-white multicolor cards and commons especially kind of need to be relevant to at least 2 or 3 of the blue-white X trios. So like there are 3, blue, white, red, black, or green as your 3-color trios involving blue, white. We need to know what those blue, white cards can do that is interesting or relevant to preferably as many of those 3 as possible. And then we also need to know what the monocolor cards do, and those need to also go in a bunch of different decks. So a lot of times it was like we would build out this grid, and then, yeah, we just need to go and look and see whether the cards exist to make it work. And what we very quickly found is that, like, in a lot of master sets, we can kind of use oddball, quirky draft archetypes that really only barely work. Like, they have exactly enough cards to make it work in this master set, but if we were to do it again, we'd have to use basically all the same cards. It's a pretty, like, we can get one set out of it, and it's cool, but, like, if that combination of cards doesn't work, it just doesn't work at all. We very quickly found that, like, those are total non-starters in this world. So, like, all of the core synergies of Double Masters 2, we needed a lot of flexibility because we needed a lot of cards that went into multiple of them. And finding those crossover cards just meant that we had to use, like, very kind of core central to Magic themes.
Now, layered on top of that, so I mean, when we're talking about limited, it's much more common and uncommon, right? That's usually definitionally. How much did you even think about limited and doing the rares and mythic rares?
Because it's a Double Masters set, quite a lot. Like rares and mythics, if you have 10 rares and mythics in your pool and 10 commons and uncommons in your pool, it's likely that you're playing most or all of the rares and some percentage of the commons and uncommons. So when we double the amount of rares in the packs, we're essentially also doubling the amount of rares in people's decks. So the amount of rares, and especially like given it has a larger than normal number of rares in the set, right, it has, I believe, 120 rares. We need those rares to like integrate fairly well with limited. And then going back to that, like we want people's first experience drafting the set to be really fun. We want to make sure that there aren't rares that kind of send them on some quest that the rest of the file doesn't support. Again, like that kind of like core archetype theme helped us there because it meant that like the pool of rares was similarly pretty large that we could pull from. But the definitely meshing the cards that see play in Commander or Modern or Pioneer or whatever else with that sort of plays well in Limited definitely presented some challenges, but honestly the sheer quantity of rares helped a bunch in that regard. Because when we have 120 rares, we have a lot of space to make sure that like the suite of rares had to support a lot of the same kind of like basic effects for limited that like commons and uncommons would normally do. So like, there are a decent number of just like Restoration Angel is just a good card in your Flicker deck. Like it does what the deck wants to do. It does it pretty well. You don't have cards like Chaos Warp or like Anguished Unmaking or like Crackling Doom. They're just like, they're powerful and they kind of do unusual things for removal spells, but like in limited, they mostly just play as like, this is just a good, solid removal spell.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about limited, and so I want to bring up that this is a reprint set. So we have all the issues for limited, but also on top of that, look, you want to reprint cards people want, right? Part of a reprint set is letting people get access to cards they're excited, because this is all about reprinting old cards. There's no new cards. How did you find balancing kind of the need for exciting cards for constructed purposes versus making the limited environment work?
In this case, they actually synergized really well. Especially with a lot of the legends and multicolor cards. Like, a lot of multicolor cards in general are just strong cards that see play in a variety of formats, like go in a bunch of commander decks, or just like generally appealing, cool cards. And when we're looking for just like cards that we think people really like, and just kind of going off of, what cards see play and are, appealing and that we, haven't banned in this format or that format. They're mostly like pretty like fun cards. Like, those are the ones that stick around in a lot of cases. As Commander has been growing as kind of just a percentage of play in Magic in general, a lot of the sort of basic core effects like point removal, sweepers, like strong creatures that see a bunch of play in Commander are rare anyway. And so we were kind of finding that, that's also true in Modern and Pioneer and Legacy, etc. But each of those formats has their own quirks and a much more constrained pool of cards. And we were finding that like a lot of those cards just wind up being, there's cool fun cards that do things we would need in limited, just at a kind of higher rate or kind of more game defining impact than we would put at common or uncommon. It definitely causes us to, we have to evaluate, especially the removal at lower rarities through that lens. Like, a lot of the rare creatures are very game defining if left completely unchecked. So the removal at lower rarities is kind of disproportionately, there's a lot more like kills almost everything, as opposed to the more like, kills some stuff or kills everything at a kind of low rate. A lot of the removal at lower rarities is just kind of making sure that you have a way to answer those like powerful cards that will run away with the game unchecked. But with regards to kind of choosing which cards we go in, a lot of it's sort of a balancing act between different formats. Like, we're looking for the headlining cards of Commander, Modern, etc. But we're also looking to kind of reintroduce people to cool old cards that are strong, but they may have just kind of fallen out of favor or may have forgotten about. And one of the things that we really like doing in master sets is kind of recontextualizing those, like showing them off in a new light. And a lot of those cards, especially like cards from Commander pre-constructed decks, are cards that people have never played in Limited and just do really fun things in the kind of bounds of that format that's kind of different from how they play in Commander and how they're used to being seen.
So anyway, I can see my desk here, so I'm almost to work. I just want to get some final thoughts from you, like sort of looking back, seeing all what Double Masters 2022 became. Sort of what are your final thoughts for how it all came together?
Ultimately, I'm really happy with how it came together. Like I definitely saw some confusion about just kind of how Cryptic Spires worked and kind of like different theories and how it was going to play out. But from what I've seen and what I've heard, that kind of goal that we aimed for of mostly you just kind of like take cards you like, settle into a like kind of 3-color path, and then the synergies kind of, if you're looking for them, do come together for you, and then kind of Cryptic Spires kind of silently, makes your mana work, and you're able to cast your cards. I haven't, like, one of the things that I was kind of, a little nervous about is sort of like, is this format just going to be too hard to draft? And from what I've seen, like, it's the usual master set level difficult to draft. Like, the synergies are fairly intensive. A lot of the cards are like pretty quirky. But I think that the kind of the mission we set out to do of like make this mostly 3-color draft format where people can occasionally play 2 colors or 4 colors or whatever if they want to. But kind of just being able to do the thing the set is trying to tell you to do and have it just kind of work out for you, I think has gone really well. And I've been really happy seeing how people are liking it.
Okay, so my final question before we leave for today, what is the most number of Cryptic Spires you've ever drafted?
I was never quite the all-in Cryptic Spires, take every Cryptic Spires I see person.
Well, what is the most anyone draft? Not just you. What's the most you've seen drafted?
I've seen about 12, but I don't know. I think that they did play all 12, but after the draft told me they wouldn't have done it again.
Okay. Well, so thank you, Bryan. Thanks for joining with us. It's a lot of fun hearing about Double Masters 2022. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And everybody else, I am at my desk. Means we all know what that means to the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking magic, it's time for me to be making magic. So thank you guys for joining me. Bryan, thanks you for being here. And I'll see all of you next time. Bye-bye.